but happy to join in. Hello, Steve.
Hi everyone. Hi Mark. Hi Steve.
Andre.
Hello.
Good
Good
to
to
see
see
you,
you.
Andre,
Good to see you too.
Paul, everybody.
Hey.
Yeah, I hope you appreciate the time because it's 3 a.m. in the middle of the night here, you know.
Oh my God. That's terrible. Wow, look at those books.
It's fine. At least my children are sleeping, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, what was your experience of the kind of work hours that Sasha kept? Was he a night owl up at 3 in the morning or?
I'm sure he was, but by the time I was hanging around here, um, he was behaving pretty much as if he was a 9 to 5 guy. So I think it probably fluxed up and down, but I really don't have. He didn't put hours in. He hardly put dates in the notebook. So it's hard to say. At least once he got here.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
have we any idea how many we're expecting this evening?
Well, hopefully Mark Martini will join us because
He's not responding.
well, he promised to be here, but my mobile phone is not working since yesterday, and I can't contact him. Can you message him, text him, Mark? Or
I have been today
oh, all
and
right,
no luck. Yeah.
all right.
I'm
So
gonna go off headphones here so Carl can hear.
good. Hi, Carl.
Carl's here.
Hello.
Greetings, Carl.
Paul says hi. Let's see here.
All right, let's wait a few more minutes.
And since it's 6 o'clock, you may see me knocking back a brew because
Or
it's our nature.
Guys sit on the floor.
I can just move it up or whatever. I've been staring at computers all day,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna focus in the midfield somewhere.
And
Mhm.
I'm a little embarrassed that I haven't been participating in the earlier sessions. So um, I'm a little unfamiliar on how you orchestrate these things.
Well, before we used to talk with Yitka mostly as an introduction and to give some background or basis for the discussion, and then others joined. But Yitka isn't here, and Mark Martini was supposed to replace her, and that's what we were hoping he's going to do. But
Well,
so far he's not
there's no
here.
replacing Yitka.
Oh yeah, of course. Maybe, well, in that case, all of us will somehow be able to do it. But I have some material to present, so I will just start. Maybe let's just wait 1 or 2 more minutes, and perhaps Mark Martini will join us. Otherwise, I will just give you what I have, and we'll have a discussion on basis of it.
What's
Well,
the subject?
I'll try texting him.
Yeah, the well, as you all know, we have designed 12 subjects, 12 sessions with Yitka, and we've managed to do 5 of them so far, but it was in a on a biweekly basis, so it was too intensive, I think, and we've decided with Mark Martini to do it on a monthly basis now. So that's the idea to continue to finish the schedule as drafted, as designed initially, once a month. And now the subject is the process of discovery. As you know, this is the phrase coined by Shulgin. He used it in many places in the introduction to Pikal and the Amsterdam lecture, where it occurs very often. It's a crucial thing, the concept of discovery, which is, I think, the main thing I would like to discuss. There is a handout, Mark, in case you haven't noticed, with some
Yeah,
quotations, ideas, and I have.
yeah. I've seen it. I'm not sure if I can
all
pull
right.
it up.
So there you can see what's the main idea. So
Mhm.
what I would like to do is I have somehow redesigned, reorganized this material into something that I can show to you right now. If you give me a second,
I,
I will
I,
just
I,
show.
I should
Yeah,
maybe point out that the idea of discovery is not unique with Sasha.
well,
This is common uh, uh, terminology in pharmaceuticals for the first steps in developing new drugs.
of course.
So
Well, it's
yeah,
the methodology of scientific discovery as such in general. I mean, Sasha himself quotes Francis Bacon somewhere in one of the interviews, so he somehow admits that he's using the traditional
yeah,
seek
yeah.
and find trial and error, whatever is the basis of this methodology. In case of Bacon, the idea was that you cannot prove that some positive concept, but you can disprove it. Yeah, there is a kind of falsification procedure.
Right, right. Well, that's the whole basis of Western science. Formulate a hypothesis and then design all the experiments to knock down your hypothesis.
Exactly, exactly. Well, yeah,
Whatever,
but he has more
whatever.
ideas which I would like to discuss. So I have prepared some materials that you can have a look at, but generally, this is based on what you have in the handout. So I will just give you a few quotations from Shulgin's writings. But briefly speaking, what I would like to focus on is the sentence that he starts his process of discovery chapter in Pikal, namely that there are two questions that there are most often asked. Why do you do the work you do, and how? And how? So one is the question of motivation, another is the question of methodology. So these are the aspects that I would like to focus on. But before I do that, I think we can have a glance at the uh, idea of discovery as such. So what is to be discovered? How, and why? Yeah. But the main thing I think is the notation and the meaning of the notation A arrow B. As you know, Shulgin repeatedly uses this simple notation and somehow interprets it in a very creative way, right? Because it seems like a very obvious equation. Yeah, if A implies B, right? A simple, not merely logical, but somehow physical relation of implication. But what he means is this is how he starts his Amsterdam lecture, the process of discovery. What he means is that usually when you have an experiment, and he then refers to the traditional paradigm, you have some assumption, some premise, a question, and then you go to the answer, to the expected result. And usually the experiment, that is the discovery itself, which is the arrow, is conditioned or somehow even um, influenced by the expected result. So you don't experiment in a pure way just to look at the possible result, whatever it is. You look for a result, and if the process doesn't give the result, it's even worse for the process itself, right? So in the lecture process of discovery, he somehow criticizes all possible conditions, financial, whatever interest there can be, that influence the purely scientific discovery that is not focused on achieving a given result that is expected, right? So you can expect something to be therapeutic or give you some financial advantage and so on and so on, and therefore it's not purely scientific. You have to be independent. In order to be scientific, which means to be able to purely investigate the process itself, to focus on the arrow, right? So this is the, I think, core idea in Shulgin's research ethics. And now you look at if you look at the arrow, or the relationship between the premise and the outcome, between the answer and the between the question and the answer, that there are more things appearing, that it's not merely the arrow, it's not merely the sign of the process or of the discovery, but the discovery itself has more and more meanings. And I think the meanings unfold as you read Shulgin's statements. But please, if you have something to add, do so. I don't want to give lectures, right? I mean, I would rather have a dialogue. So if you have something to add, do that immediately.
Right. Well, there are some observations I could make. The process of science, of course, can be applied to goals that are commercial, but the purity of science, the process of making observations as you do, work at the bench, um, are preserved. So yes, it's wonderful to be able to be um, uh, free of pecuniary interests, but that doesn't diminish the fact that you can learn a whole lot in the process by just keeping your eyes open and watching what happens as you do the work.
Yeah, agreed. Or, for example, another example, when I look at Carl and Mark, what comes to my mind is the bias, the cognitive bias that you can have when you assume something. So we often assume, like for example, in the case of the Eleusinian mysteries, that either there must have been a psychoactive kick on, or there wasn't one, and you prove a thesis that is already assumed, which is not really scientific. But the question is, can we scientifically investigate this without assuming some expected result, right? So there are many conservative scholars who assume that certainly there was nothing psychoactive there, and they choose, or whatever arguments they have, in order to prove an already assumed result, right? So how what the question, the proper question to ask would be, what would be the proof, or the argument, or the fact, or whatever thing that you could think of, that could convince you of a certain claim, yeah, of how do you falsify or verify the hypothesis? We only
Well,
have
in that case, it's a combination of forensic evidence and technology that's up to the problem of detecting minute amounts of target compounds in a very ancient matrix. So,
unless you use literary evidences as proofs, yes, symbols, hints, allusions, because no one
right.
admitted this directly, explicitly, right? So
Yeah, well, of course, there's a fundamental difference between the kinds of evidence and the types of argumentative approach between science and the humanities. That where one is based on the type of evidence that Paul's talking about, that you identify a compound, um, versus, say, analyzing esoteric texts. I think that would be an interesting subject, is comparing what is considered um, sufficient evidence to prove, or what would constitute proof between science versus the humanities.
yeah, but agreed. But I think this leads us to a very interesting thing that Shulgin observed, namely that a scientific discovery is not merely an observation of facts, but also a creation, let's say, or co-creation. You somehow, by observing, and this is very strange from a, let's say, scientific materialistic, at least mechanic outlook or worldview, right? So because he says that these quotations that I'm going to present now are very radical. He says that somehow the chemical, when you encounter it, does not have any properties initially, yeah? And he says that when a compound emerges as a new substance, it is still a tabula rasa in the pharmacological sense. Nothing is known, nothing can be known, because it has never been in a man. But so whether the question is whether it means we just don't know its properties, or they aren't there ontologically, factually, yes, physically. He seems to suggest in several statements that the properties of the compound are created as long at the moment of being observed. So he says, at the moment of a person's conception, many faces have been seen, because there is this analogy to the birth of a child that he gives. Yeah, that when a child is born, many things are already defined genetically, obviously, right? But not everything. Yeah. So, and similarly, analogically, pharmacological action doesn't have a fixed property, but it emerges with the idea of a new substance. When the idea of a new substance is conceived, nothing exists but symbols. The structure, Shulgin says, is already given, but not maybe some characteristic, but the properties not only cannot be known, at this stage they do not yet even exist, he says. So he says in the process of discovery, this is very radical in the terms of scientific method and the ontology of scientific discovery. He says that only with the development of the relationship between the thing tested and the tester, this character, this property emerges, and the tester is as much a contributor to the final definition of the drug's action as the drug itself. So the process of establishing the nature, the property of a compound, is synonymous with developing this action. And if we assume that it is similar with history, it would mean that we, by means of posing hypotheses, for example, on the nature of the Eleusinian mystery, somehow not only discover it, but also co-create it. That would be a very radical thing. But I think Heidegger, at least Heidegger, has a similar view on history, that things from the past are not merely closed down, objectively set and defined, but a subject that discovers the meaning of history or the action or the character of a chemical compound somehow creates them when they are observed, measured, defined. Yes, so this is very radical. And if you agree that this occurs in the case of chemistry, and if you agree that by analogy occurs in case of science, we are talking perhaps of a certain negotiation of these properties when you argue that they are such and such, whether a certain compound is therapeutic, dangerous, destructive, and so on. Yeah, and similarly with the case of the mysteries that we are somehow interested in, which is of course also politically non-neutral. Yeah, it's all embedded within some interests, contemporary interests. It's not a case of purely historical facts. What do you think?
Well, there are examples I think that probably shed some light on this. I'm thinking of thalidomide. Thalidomide was initially thought to be a useful drug for treating morning sickness and depression in pregnant women, but it was discovered then that many horribly deformed babies were born after their mothers had consumed this drug. So it became synonymous with the concept of a teratogen, something that would create monstrous deformities. And yet later, revisiting it, and in particular looking at the chiral forms, one of the chiral forms has emerged as a potentially useful compound in treating cancers associated with HIV infection. So the perception of what a drug is and what its actions are can certainly flux with time and further examination. And I think that might be what he's alluding to here. You know, the point of view of the investigator, the viewer, the consumer influences what the actual ultimate drug action, how it manifests.
Yeah, well, I think you can somehow radicalize this idea. Uh, I think Heidegger, whom I've mentioned, has a similar intuition when he says that before Newton's laws were discovered, they were not true. They were neither true nor false, because the fact that they were not true doesn't mean that they were false, or even that they would become false if their discoveredness was no longer possible. So what he means, I think, is that before you define a law, it is neither true nor false. It doesn't mean it's not operative, but it is not true in the pragmatic sense. Yes, so here you don't, I think, distinguish between the subjective knowledge of a law and its objective operativity, right? So I think Shulgin has a similar idea that because we in the I think in the usual worldview, scientific worldview, we assume that laws or properties, physical, chemical properties, are somehow objectively set, whether we know them or not, right? And the other possibility is that we somehow participate or co-create their characteristic when we discover them. So I think this is in agreement with what you said, but the question is how radically do we understand this co-creation, this participation? I think in Shulgin's statements you can see he's very radical, that the establishing of the compounds action is synonymous with developing this action. So he puts a very strong stress, a very strong accent on the subjective moment of creating this. Correct.
Let me pose something here. Suppose I were Shulgin and I invented a completely novel compound that had never been synthesized before and never been taken by anyone before. I've got my stash, and in one experiment I go and I take it and I go to heavy metal concerts, every day for a month. And in the other, I take my stash and I go listen to classical music concerts every day for a month. And then other people get to try the drug. Would I have imposed, projected a certain experience, would I have formed the experience that people will have with the drug because I got to it first and I put and sort of imposed my will upon it by the environment that I put myself in and put the drug in effect. So do you think that, what do you think Sasha would say about that?
Paul, maybe you could answer.
Well, I could wave my hands about it. It sounds like you're implying that the inventor, the first taster, uh, would have an overwhelming effect on set and setting of all subsequent explorers of that drug. And I don't think that's necessarily valid, because people will encounter chemical substances as they will, and use them in supportive environments or stressful environments or insane environments and have very different experiences. And I don't know that the initial intent for use carries along with the drug. It may carry along with the communication about the drug, but it doesn't impose a vibration on that substance that changes the nature of it in all circumstances.
So that's what you think. But what do you think Sasha would think? I mean, I wish this theory were true because there's so many drugs that only Sasha took, or at least he loaded them. He charged them up initially, so we could benefit from that downstream. But Paul, or would anyone venture to is this what Sasha's implying? Is this an extension of what Sasha is saying in the material we're covering right now, or am I going off in a new direction?
Yes, I think this should be somehow extended. This argument with the understanding of Sasha's methodology, namely the function of the group of the research group, the sensorium, as he called it. Because there is a confirmation of this initial usage, and once it's confirmed, once it's socially recognized, mutually recognized, then it becomes somehow ontologically stronger, more grounded, more objective, in a sense. And this is also how this initial character seems to spread. But I would perhaps suggest another analogy, namely the analogy of also scientific discovery, the discovery of physical and mathematical properties of nature. Namely, take the example of the differential calculus, discovered by Leibniz and Newton almost at the same time. And it seems that this is the argument of a Polish historian of science, Krzysztof Morin. He argued that in a very Platonic way, that the mathematical ideas and physical ideas are somehow subjective, transpersonal, so to speak. Yes, that once they are discovered by someone, they exist independently of the mind of the one who discovered them. And so once a certain Newton or Leibniz discovers the differential, of course, it was the differential calculus was a consequence of the discovery of certain physical properties of nature. In order to model them with mathematical formulae, he had to develop this type of calculus. And once he did it, it already existed in a kind of trans-subjective, trans-individual, transpersonal mind. And then it spread around across the scientific community. And perhaps we could assume that this works similarly in case of chemical substances. Yes, that it is not merely the question of arguing for a certain interpretation by means of discourse and argument, but perhaps there is a kind of physical objectivity in this relation that is developed between the tester and the tested compound.
So the physical properties of the universe, the mathematics of the universe, is actually already set in stone out there. It's just up to us to get there and discover it and prove the Riemann hypothesis or whatever. And therefore, also, it's already preordained that we will think of MDMA as a sort of entheogenic heart, loving drug, as different from, say, cocaine. That this is all just out there, and it's just up to us to discover. But it's what's going to happen is already clear, given the synapses in our mind, given the way we've evolved, given the way the chemicals are going to be interacting with it, and all these things. But I conclude this? Sasha didn't feel that way.
Exactly. This is not what I said. I rather suggested what Sasha himself suggested, that it's a question of a relationship that is a relationship of the one who discovers something with that which is to be discovered, right? So they are somehow, even the laws or the characters of chemical compounds are somehow relative to the relation of the discoverer and that which is discovered.
But then when Leibniz discovered differential calculus,
Yeah.
Does the universe ask him his opinion of, well, what do you want to do with this here, Leibniz? How do you interpret this? No, or is it like, no, this is what it is, and this is what it's used for, and thank you for discovering it, but we'll take it from here. It's already a done deal. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Well, the universe, I mean, it depends on what do you mean by the universe or nature. Well, I think nature, it's an ancient tradition that nature is a subject, in whatever sense. Yeah, so how do you relate to this subject? That's another question. I'm not sure it's a bunch of objective facts that are hidden just to be discovered. Perhaps it's something different. There was a society of in Renaissance Italy and in early modern Italy, it was called Academia Secretorum Naturae, and it was the Academy of Natural Scientists who discovered laws of nature. But it was said that only those can be admitted to whom nature disclosed one of its secrets. So nature was considered a subject that discloses something, but perhaps this disclosure was also relational. And I would say Shulgin certainly was a member of this academy in this sense. So
great. Yeah, very well. Thank you.
I think he even makes several statements of this kind about this relationship with nature and the substance that is to be discovered. That it is a meeting. There is a communion between the one who discovers and the particle to be discovered. So yeah, we've discussed it. We've discussed it, I think, already. So any more comments on this? What do you think? I think this. Yeah.
I'm thinking in terms of the difficulties that clinicians experience in trying to structure studies that attempt to find the uses and the limits of benefit from psychoactive substances. So as you design your experiments, expectation bias is one of the things that you have to kind of struggle against. And I wonder if partly what we're talking about is how expectation bias gets communicated from the initial discoverer to all the subsequent consumers of some new substance. I don't think most substances emerge in a vacuum with no supporting information, and so just the nature of that information. Oh, it was desirable. Oh, I reached a +4. Oh, it caused me to feel like I was having a seizure. All of those comments color the experience of all the subsequent folks who are exposed to that substance. So I don't know how one separates those things. We're not talking quantum physics here. Something that can be tested unequivocally experimentally. It's messy when you talk about substances that change perception. It's very messy.
That's a really great point, Paul. But wouldn't that be the point of like a double-blind study to to eliminate the expectation bias if the person doing the study doesn't know what they're giving to the person and the person doesn't know what's actually being studied, then wouldn't that help to safeguard against that expectation bias?
It would, and that's why such studies are virtually impossible with psychoactive substances.
Sure.
So and Sasha, I think, railed against the concept of double blind because basically they would all fail. There have been some attempts to have placebos that are other psychoactive drugs. Roland Griffiths used Ritalin in the 2006 study to give some credence to people feeling that they were altered. And in fact, he, in applying the mystical rating scales, found that at least a couple of the people who received Ritalin placebo had mystical experiences that were probably just as profound as the people who had received psilocybin.
Wow.
So, but it's a very messy problem, and not one that is going to be easily resolved.
Do they find that there is still that expectation bias when they're doing a study with people who have no former experience with those drugs, and so they don't have an expectation or a knowledge or a previous
Well,
experience to compare to?
ethical considerations creep in here too.
Yeah,
If you have a naive subject and they enter a drug trial, they have to be informed to a degree that, oh, we're going to give you either a drug or a placebo that may cause some alteration. You have to say something,
sure.
to take a subject in and give them a nice fat dose of LSD when they have no preparation for it at all, broaches the limits of ethics. So we don't do that.
Yeah. Kaiser did that to me with my ketamine infusions when I started. They gave me absolutely no like heads up on what I was about to experience. I was glad that I had my previous experience with psychedelics when I had that experience. But a lot of people who go into that and are not prepared have very negative experiences from the treatments.
Well, and
Interesting.
were they giving you ketamine for a psychological purpose or for
Chronic pain,
anesthesia? Okay,
high dose
well,
IV infusion over 5 hours for chronic pain. Yeah.
right. Well, that's part of the reason that ketamine fell in disfavor for many decades. It's it was popular in the Vietnam War because you could knock people out in the field without the risk of their respiratory system being shut down. And then after it came back, exactly this problem emerged, and it really fell out of disfavor for a very long time.
Mhm.
So, we're learning how to use these substances as we go along.
I think the whole conversation around, the energy that can be added to something, when somebody creates something, and then shares it with the world, they're creating a construct. They're putting a definition on it that then informs every other person who now is learning about it. And so I definitely feel like there's a sort of energy that is attached to that and a power, I guess, that somebody has when they've discovered something to be able to sort of start the definition for other people of what that thing should be. But then I also think that even with between different batches, not necessarily by the person who has discovered something, but just like with art, there's transference. Just like with therapy between people, there's transference. I feel like there's transference of energy that can happen with the person who's actually, creating or synthesizing a compound, and depending on the state that they're in or the will that they put into it or whatever they're broadcasting at that moment, that can have an effect on the people who are then having that experience later by ingesting it. It would be really interesting to be able to somehow do some sort of research on that. I think there's a lot about energy we don't necessarily understand.
Yeah,
Well,
Paul, sure.
well, the caveat that I would bring to it is uh, to differentiate between purity of substance, which can be, objectively defined, through, instrumentation and whatnot, and some metaphysical uh, uh, imprint uh, that you'd not be able to address. And how would you design the experiment? Have someone who was an excellent chemist but had really bad intent, producing a very pure substance, as opposed to someone who was a sloppy chemist but still happened to make, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but on the
Perhaps
other
one
hand,
day in the future we'll have the tools to measure things differently.
well, subjective states can be measured. At least their expression can be somehow determined and compared. But what I wanted to say is that a similar idea appeared in literary theory. Namely, there is a certain ontology of the work of art called the reception theory, according to which an object, like a textual object, for example, writing, a poem or whatever else, uh, is not independent of its reception. Namely, it doesn't exist objectively and independently of the process of reading it and interpreting it and understanding it, which is distributed, collectively distributed. So each, according to this theory, each single process of interpretation, of reading, is not merely subjective and individual, local, but influences this work. Yeah, that by it the work lives in all readers and somehow develops its meaning. So at the outset, it is a merely potential structure that is somehow fulfilled and actualized in all the acts of its reception. So I think it can be analogous to the idea of the development of a chemical compound's character here, right? This is, I think, what you suggested, using the concept of energy, right? So however you conceptualize it, the assumption is that the objects are not independent of each other, right? But they develop their properties, their character or their meaning with each actualization of their function and their activity, right? So here Shulgin was the one who wanted to grasp the compounds at the outset, at the moment of their purity, when no one yet tasted them, and where you could somehow define or somehow create this property in its initial state when it was untouched by anyone, right? I think this was his specialty, right? And of those who follow him. But we are in a different situation nowadays. It seems that most of the classical, at least, structures are already examined. There's not whatever is to discover is just the margins, the marginal spaces. There seems to be no new family of compounds of this scope and class as he managed to discover.
Well, he did flood the zone, certainly.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't say that there's nothing left to be discovered.
So what is there? What do you think? Do you think there can be something like MDMA, like something completely unknown and something we cannot even think of?
Well, Brian Roth is certainly putting a lot of effort into designing new scaffolds, based on analyzing what we understand of the receptors. How many of those have actually been realized is something that I can't answer. I don't think that's really been publicized, but the physical chemistry of known receptors is becoming better and better known. The application of advanced computer techniques to model their structure and to test um, uh, new forms of drugs. In other words, not sticking to just the phenethylamines, the lysergamides, the tryptamines, but new scaffolds. The pharmacologists and pharmaceutical folks would say. Um, New ones can very likely emerge, but it's a long process.
What kind of
And
structures would that be? They would have to be somehow analogous to the neurotransmitters that we already have in our minds or
that's
brains,
certainly
right?
that's the model that we're working with. But there are also allosteric effectors, so compounds that don't necessarily interact with the what we call the binding pocket, where an unknown drug lodges itself. We're only what 10 years away from the report in Cell where there was a model of how an LSD molecule sits in the pocket of a serotonin receptor, based on crystallography
Yeah.
and modeling of the amino acid sequences, etc. So it's quite possible that new structures, maybe they'll be more likely to be modifications that still interact with the binding pockets. and not other portions of the receptor that modify how the receptor as a whole reacts to, say, known drugs or to the endogenous neurotransmitters. But all those things are possible.
Yeah, well,
That's what
okay.
keeps medicinal chemists going.
But tell me, in case of Brian Roth, theoretically this seems plausible. But has he designed any particular molecules or structures that you can name, or is it just a
Well, no.
myth of a possibility of structures?
The claim is that there are hundreds of new structures that are being suggested by his modeling work. But
Right.
as I say, I don't know if any or how many have been actually made and trialed.
Yeah.
So that's
None of them was made public so far, right?
yeah. Well, and that may be something that we'll hear about next week. Who knows?
Hopefully. All right.
But I would say before Sasha did his work, everything that he did would have been just a myth. Before something is discovered, it's unknown. And so to even close yourself off and to say that nothing new can be discovered when we're still in such infancy in really understanding neurochemistry and the brain and what's going on in there, closes us off to the possibility of discovering the more that is potentially out there. And the way that all of these, activation of multiple different receptors in different ways can have an effect on things too. I love that Brian Roth is doing that work because I think there's still a ton to be discovered.
Okay, so a shift in methodology. Okay, let's hope so. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, and the methodology he's created with more so than specifically the novel compounds, but assays like TruePath and Presto Tango that Brian Roth has worked on kind of allow people to get these really wide screens of new sites that could potentially be attacked and how new scaffolds might attack them. So, making new compounds is cool. We have a couple here that we're working on, but being able to open the intellectual space up for tremendous amounts of new creation, I think really sets the playing field for who knows the next 100 years. And I really love that about what Brian's doing there.
Okay, so I have some more thoughts to share and perhaps to discuss. The question, namely, perhaps we could return to the question of why and to the question of how, namely to the motivation and the methodology. I know these are fundamental questions, so let me just somehow summarize what Shulgin himself states in his writings. I will just share the screen with you. Let me do it now, and then let's discuss these ideas. So let's start with why, with the motivation. So first he says that, and this is somehow interesting, that what he did, namely the methodology of tasting minimal amounts below threshold and then trying them out, is not something modern. It's something very, 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 very traditional. This is the most ancient and time-honored way practiced by medicine men and shamans for thousands of years. This is what he says. So this is one thing. In order to discover the activity of some plant, it had to be tasted in exactly the same way as Shulgin did with new chemical compounds. So this is one thing. Another thing. So he continues this shamanic tradition in a modern chemical way. One thing, one motivation. Another one, he says there is a wealth of information built into us. Yeah. You want to comment on it? Or I thought someone said something. Another thing is the epistemic or epistemologic drive or motivation. Yeah. So there is a wealth of information built into us, into our cells, into the genetic material. So, but we don't have access to it directly. So, according to him, psychedelics and the substances he researched give us access to this store, to this information, accessible somehow, but not in an obvious way. So in order to find it out, we need to We need to do this research, not merely chemical research, but so to speak, noetic mental research, research within the realm of the mind. Third, the existential motivation. Yes, he says that each of us at some point of his life will feel himself a stranger in the land of his own existence. And then this alienation, this moment of alienation, of being out of this world, or somehow is the premise of this quest of self-knowledge. Then there is this, so to speak, mystical motivation, mystical drive, or metaphysical, you could say. He has those statements which are very, very interesting. They are rare, but spread around his work, that at some point he felt, and he's very, very grateful for it, he felt the unity, oneness with the creation and its creator. And so this is the theological stance, but he says that even more precious than this, he touched the core of his own soul. So this psychological motivation of the knowledge of the psyche, this is somehow, or self-knowledge, is somehow the motivation, the metaphysical, mystical, or theological motivation behind. Then there is this sensual, so to speak, aesthetic, perhaps also erotic impulse or motivation. Yeah, some of it should not be, I think, considered underrated or less important than the others. I would just quote Plato, who said that out of all the ideas who traditionally can be perceived as the thoughts of the absolute mind, yes, in traditional Platonism, ideas are thoughts of the absolute mind, and as Aristotle says, the absolute mind thinking itself is the world, right? Whatever the absolute mind thinks occurs, is realized as the world, and it's in its material existence. So what Plato says is that out of all the ideas, beauty is the most special, because it is available through senses. Yeah. So the beauty, the idea of beauty, is what one can perceive not with our mind, but also with our senses. So it is visually, sensually accessible. And I think this is what Shulgin stresses here, that whatever you can experience with your mind through senses appears, gives itself in this aesthetic experience. And I think this is very Platonic, very Platonic. Yeah, the affirmation or the appreciation of the senses has this transcendent quality to it. That so I would not diminish the senses. I think this is very, very Platonic, very metaphysical, so to speak. This aesthetic motivation of Shulgin. And then we have this evolutionary but also metaphysical motivation, where Shulgin says that, and this is very interesting, I think it's a quotation from the Process of Discovery. Yeah, so the introduction to Pikal, where he says, life continuously appears in different forms and identities, but whatever gives shape to each new expression of life does not change at all. So there is some ultimate subject, life itself, nature itself, that which is unchanged behind that which changes itself. Yeah, this is the first principle of being, actually, in metaphysical terms. And Shulgin here is a metaphysician par excellence, right? He has this purely metaphysical insight that there is something unchanged and unchanging behind all changes. The unmoved mover, as Aristotle says, right? So he has this purely metaphysical insights as the motivation for the research, right? And so I think discovering this unchanged principle behind all change is something that drives his research. There is also the ethical, political aspect. When he says, why is peyote, for example, classified as Schedule 1, while it's known to be used in the religious rituals for ages. This is a scandal, and this is somehow unbearable, unacceptable. So this must be ethically challenged and politically questioned. So there is the transformative aspect as the why, as the motive. So, of course, one can transform one's life because of certain experiences that are triggered by means of various substances that he's researching. Yeah, and there is this, so to speak, a humanistic universal motive that in various civilizations we've used the substances that Shulgin is researching and somehow extending, and therefore we have the right and the obligation, perhaps the moral, ethical, scientific obligation to continue this, to understand it, to pursue. And the ultimate motive, I would say, which is somehow metaphysical, somehow religious, somehow ontological, the curiosity of being, which is not merely one's own being, the existential motive, but being as such, yes. So the quest to know oneself is the quest to know being, one's own being, which is being per se. Yeah, and this is the core of the soul, I think, which he mentioned, right, in this quotation that I've mentioned. Yeah, the most precious, ultimate goal of discovery. So yeah, I would summarize the motives in this way. What do you think?
Well, a lot to chew on there. I kind of fall back to the aesthetics of the process of designing and creating new psychoactive substances. Um, the the whole process is sort of a Zen koan. Uh, it requires intense concentration, uh, attention to kind of all aspects of being around the process, and ultimately the reward is the next step, which is consuming the substances and exploring their effects. So. Um, I would agree that I think a lot of Sasha's writings do have kind of an alchemical flavor to them, where the process is one of self-discovery as much as discovery about the universe or about molecules or substances. Uh, so I don't know if that really sheds much light on the questions.
Yeah, I think the chemical, or if you prefer, alchemical process of discovery is somehow a discovery of being itself, mediated through this chemical act of meditation, right? So yeah, I think,
Yeah, exactly.
agreed,
It's a
agreed.
meditation on the physical universe and how one as a practitioner can modify it to new ends. So yeah, I think there is a certain alchemical flair to a lot of Sasha's work and writings.
And even this, it's not merely a discovery, it's an act of creation at the same time. The lower the level of the discoveries, the deeper the possibility of transformation, I would say, right?
Right. Well,
The further
then
you get, the more you can somehow transform or change or hack, so to speak.
yeah, and in fact, in the early work where he started with mescaline, then
Right.
experimented with TMA, and then discovered TMA2. The drive was to find more potent materials that were also more specific to achieve the end point that he was looking for. So in medicinal chemistry, a search for potency is often driven with the philosophy that if your substance is more potent, at the for creating the desired effect, you're reducing the likelihood of effects on other parts of the body that could create side effects. So there's a parallel with alchemical endeavors where purifying and repurifying materials to isolate an essence or uh, the a philosophy a substance of kind of unobtainable purity was kind of the point. The process was one of achieving psychological purity through an effort to purify substances in the physical world.
By the way, what do you think of this shift from Sasha's shift from quantity to quality? Because in his early papers, he clearly puts stress on the quantitative aspect, that something is stronger, more efficient, and so on and so on. And then the
Right.
qualitative aspects appears later on, right?
Well, but keep in mind that the dogma in the early days was that the known psychedelics, with mescaline, LSD, and psilocybin, produced the same effect. They just differed in potency and duration. So with Sasha's comparison of mescaline to TMA, 3,4,5 trimethoxyamphetamine, he blew that open. Mescaline creates a benign beatific state where appreciation of natural subjects is paramount. And with TMA, although it was twice as potent gram for gram in terms of producing a psychedelic effect, it also created hostility and paranoid delusions. So clearly there were qualitative differences that were very dramatic, and fortunately it happened very early, and I think that created the trajectory of looking for what are in fact the realms of qualitative difference between these different substances. So I think that was very impactful in directing his later work.
Although he never seems to have developed a, so to speak, mm, phenomenology of these states, a
Right.
classification. Yeah. So
Right. Well, except in prose. So
yeah,
where he says, oh, this was excellent for erotic endeavors, or this was a flop.
yeah,
There are lots of hints about the nature of substances, but they're
of
buried
course.
in the
But it's not
prose.
systematic. It's not a systematic
Right. Right.
cartography of the states of mind. Yes,
Right.
it's
Well, he was not a quantitative psychologist. He was a great chemist.
yeah, yeah.
So, but a very bright gentleman, and I think the hints are there for us to explore. And as the psychological instruments improve, we'll be able to tease these effects out, and maybe use them as sort of exploratory markers for guiding future development.
I think the most interesting remark that you can find in his writings about those transcendent states, the highest states of mind, where they are not merely sensory modifications, but something higher than this, is the remark in the description of plus four, where he says that if this was a state that could be somewhat triggered in a deterministic way to all possible
Right,
subjects, the experiment of human history would be a descent, which
right, right.
means this is a very metaphysical statement, right? So it's something that you cannot trigger with a certain chemical. So what triggers it? This is the question. When does it occur?
Well, it's a combination of things. One book that was on his bookshelf for quite a while was Childhood's End, Arthur Clarke. That's the climax shows these gifted children who somehow just spontaneously appeared, create kind of a matrix and transcend physical reality, and it's kind of that sort of thinking, that the human experiment might end when mind and self transcend the need for physics.
Yeah, but it's possible for individuals. I think Huxley says at some point that it's possible for everyone who looks for it, without any exception. But in Shulgin's statements, it was not merely the question of an individual's possibility to discover the state, but for the entire humanity to discover it would be the end of the human experiment, right? If you could trigger it in every possible single individual.
Well, there will be always plenty of assholes who aren't interested. So I think trying to spread that kind of knowledge to the bulk of humanity is not something we have to worry about.
Yeah. William, hi, good to see you. Would you like to add something? And I think Matthew has joined us. Good to see you all.
I'll just say that there's something in the chat that's where apparently it was Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living. So that seems like a motivation for examining our lives through psychedelics. I'm sure we're all down with that. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. The question of self-discovery, self-examination, self-knowledge. This is the Apollonian dictum, yeah, that one has to know oneself. Gnoti se auton, yes. So know thyself, and then you will discover the meaning of the self. That is not, well, perhaps not merely your own limited individual self, but some kind of higher self. But of course, it's not about stating it, but about experiencing it. So it doesn't make sense to answer the question, what is there? Who is the one who knows oneself? It is about knowing this self and not about merely discursively speaking about it. So I think, yeah, that's why we need those tools that Sasha was developing.
Yeah, and in terms of not merely discursively speaking about it, I always like the quote from John Lilly, shoot up or shut up. Just get out there. And we can talk about it. You got to experience it.
Yeah, agreed. Paul, again?
Yeah, a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, and I would add that I think there was, if you think about the early LSD chemists who really thought, they took really the path of let's try and change as many people as we can by distributing as much as we can. And I think then it changed a little bit sociologically to let's work on ourselves, and then maybe if we can all work on ourselves and basically help each other, that's another way of approaching it. It almost seemed to be a shift at some point.
Right. One does have to kind of be cautious about the sort of messianic evangelical aspect of self-realization. It's been the downfall of a lot of organizations.
Right.
Whether you're talking, Church of Scientology or Microsoft, there are a lot of examples of organizations that have thought they've had an answer or the answer that have gone on to burn out for lack of being able to really promote it in an acceptable way. So,
yeah, good point.
So I apologize for coming in so late to this very rich discussion, but a couple broad comments. I really I've enjoyed reading the documents associated with this discussion. In terms of Sasha's method of discovery, though, I would suggest we should be very cautious about taking him at his word. In the same way that he was often evasive and protective of the risks of his practices, many of the things he said about how he worked, I think if you actually go and look at the lab books and look at how he like switches between drugs during dose run-ups and does a lot of things that maybe are not as cautious as he suggests his method would entail. And so just as like one example that's a little bit of a mystery to me is, Karl Reznikov, describes taking MDMA before Sasha did. as part of an independent study class at Berkeley, where he worked with Sasha. They synthesized MDMA together, and then Sasha left Carl with doses for both him and Carl's girlfriend. How did Sasha know what a dose was for that? He had never done a dose run-up for it. And so if anything, he would have been guessing based on the potency of MDA. But that's completely at variance with what he would describe as being his method. And if you just try to take the lab books and sort the experiences by date, you see that while he's doing a sensible dose run-up for one drug, he'll intersperse it with other drugs that are likely to cause tolerance or alter his dose run-up for the first drug. And so his methods are, as practiced, are way messier than the very clean ones he describes in his work. I mean, not a criticism at all, because of course he has way more experience and wisdom than I can ever hope to have. But I think we should start empirically with what he did versus what he says he did.
Yeah, interesting remark. Paul, anything on this?
Well, yeah, I've had the same concerns that the interleaving of dose escalation probably ended up exposing him to pretty much continuous stimulation of all sorts of receptors. And I think he paid the ultimate price when, in his 80s, he had to have a heart valve replaced. I think I've maintained he's kind of the poster child for serotonin 2B, cell proliferation and heart valve. And, the quality of life after that was substantially affected. So,
Yep,
yeah.
I think that's right. Absolutely. In terms of his beliefs about early experiences somehow conditioning later experiences, this is something that I don't fully understand. And so I don't feel like I can describe what he thought about this. Nicholas Langlitz has written a little bit about this in one of his essays. And it does seem like Sasha believed that there was some kind of interaction that he had with the molecule as the first taster that somehow would influence later experiences that other people had. That wasn't just him giving people expectations, that there was something sort of deeper and more profound in that relationship between him and his molecule.
Something beyond pharmacology.
Yeah, and so there's something there that's quite subtle and complex that I think is worthy of study as well.
What did Nick Langlitz say on this? Because we've discussed it here before you joined us. So I'm interested in Langlitz in his claims. What was it?
I was trying to pull it up so I could cite it to you, because I don't feel like I understand it well enough to repeat it. But essentially it seems like Sasha believes that, like I said, that there's some imprint left on the molecule's effects by the early experiences and possibly by the inventor in some other way, that like as he works with a compound to synthesize it and purify it and then taste it, that relationship there creates the personality of the molecule that then becomes a characteristic of the molecule for later tastings.
Yes, this is exactly what we've discussed here, what he clearly states in several places. So the question is, what ontology, what model you would somehow propose to allow for such a statement, such a possibility. So
okay, great. Yeah, to me, I think Sasha was just describing empirically what he experienced and wasn't trying to theorize on it.
Good enough, but for us it's not necessary, not enough, not necessary to just stop at this point. We need to somehow explain it, right? I think.
Yeah, and that's it goes beyond science, and so anyone who tries to keep our credibility in the scientific realm intact, it becomes perilous to get too far into speculating there. I mean, I would like it to be the case that it's almost entirely predicated on him like having some kind of subtle vibes that other animals pick up. So like if I've only ever had great experiences with a molecule and then I give it to you and I say, yeah, try it. I don't know what you'll experience, but maybe start with 5 milligrams and see. And like, even though I'm trying to be neutral, like my being as an animal has subtle signals that you will pick up. And so you will still, like, there's rich communication there beyond just the verbal realm. And so that's what I would like it to be. I'd like it to be simple, like kind of physical, biological stuff, but I don't think that's what Sasha believed.
Yeah, so it's a different ontology. Yeah, Paul.
This is sounding an awful lot like Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic field theory.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's also it's getting into that area which is, I think, really interesting. Like when you talk to, if you talk to Leonard Picard and you hear about Nick Sand and so on, basically praying over the LSD as it turned to LSD, because they wanted the energy to be good for people. And I think then when you think about shamans, ayahuasqueros making ayahuasca, they would never consider making it without praying over it. And I think, I don't know alchemy well enough, but I feel like Sasha's method was very alchemical. I think the alchemists believed that the maker of, the person who made the product, his energy was going to go into that. So I think it's an interesting area in general.
I think so, yeah. And certainly Bear thought that too. Owsley believed that specifically the crystallization process, I think, would encode the mental states and kind of spiritual intentions of the people doing the crystallization. And I've wondered about that. I tried to ask this question with respect to blotter and blotter art, because if you're manufacturing blotter, you are dissolving the material in solution and recrystallizing it, and there's this interaction with this piece of paper with this kind of art on it. And I wonder what the beliefs are of the people doing that kind of work, and whether this is also some kind of deep sacred process that is imprinting or somehow conditioning further experiences that people will have with the material.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting area. I mean, I heard somebody speak who was grows psilocybin, and he said he'd had something wrong with this batch. He was very stressed. He gave it to some friends, and they took it, and they said, we could feel your stress. We knew that you were stressed while you were making this. We could feel it. And I have a friend who's a therapist, and he's trying to find psilocybin that's been grown in a sound bath, because he believes that the intention of whoever grew it would actually, he believes it comes through in sessions. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, when I was running clinical trials, we would always set intention before we dosed people. And it was one of these things that it's, we don't know if it matters or not scientifically, but if the goal of your experiment is to bring back some useful knowledge that can reduce suffering for all beings, I feel like there's some chance that has a different effect in the world than if you don't set that intention. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
yeah. This reminds me of an anecdote about, I think, Pauli or Heisenberg, one of the famous physicists who had a cottage somewhere in the mountains, and he was visited by a journalist, and the journalist saw a horseshoe on the wall, and says, "Well, man, like you, a man of science, and you believe in miracles, and what kind of a prejudice is this? And he says, well, I've heard it works whether you believe in it or not. So, but nevertheless, what I wanted to say is to suggest not anecdotes of this kind of energy morphic field, whatever it is, but to look at the process of discovery that Shulgin himself described. And he, in the process of discovery lecture in Amsterdam, he repeats one of the stories that he always alluded to, namely the discovery of this insecticide that made him independent at Dow. And what he says is that I think it is a very good example of a creative process in this Shulginian understanding. Namely, according to the anecdote, there was a substance that they were working on, and namely, I think it was called physostigmine, yeah, and a substance they were developing had a similar structure, but he said he had an intuition. If you add something here and something there, it will have this property of an insecticide, even though he didn't know. He wasn't certain. It was also only a reasoning based on analogy, but it was a substance that they created as a side product of something. It was not the product they expected. They wanted to discard it, but he thought, let's do this, add something here, and it worked according to his intuition. But the question is whether or not he somehow created the activity by means of intending it to have this effect. And the effect was not merely subjective on the mind of a person who takes a psychedelic, but it was objective as an insecticide. According to this theory that you create the activity of a novel compound by means of somehow assuming it has a certain effect or a certain activity. In this case, if we agree with this model, by intending it to have this effect and by reasoning by means of analogy, he created the possibility of this effect, and it worked. And it created defined his entire career and his entire methodology. It seems to be the first case of such a creative event of discovery. What do you think?
Well, I'm always amused at the fact that Sasha and Raphael Mechoulam, who discovered the structure of THC, both started with insecticide chemistry. So, but it is what you're saying that by random chance, if someone else synthesized that molecule with some other complete intent, that its insecticidal properties would never be recognized. It's possible. I mean, the story of LSD, it was being made to be an analeptic, and the initial tests that would have revealed that activity were a failure, and it was only by some perhaps mystical inclination that Hoffman made another batch and was exposed and then exposed himself. So, maybe there's something to that.
At least that's what Nikos says, that it had this kind of a metaphysical or mystical aspect to it. Yeah, that.
Well, being in the presence of highly purified LSD does have, but that now we can't divorce ourselves from the fact that we know what we're around.
Yeah,
and he didn't.
Oh, so you would suggest that by analogy, Hoffman, with his mystical tendencies that he himself claims to have had since his childhood, he imposed those qualities upon the molecule. Yeah. Well,
perhaps no way to devise an experiment to test that idea.
Well, perhaps there could be an experiment of this kind. I don't know. Why not? After all.
Well, we can think of a lot of things.
Let's think of such an experiment. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I share something.
Sorry?
Could I share something?
Of course, please.
Thank you. Greetings from Poland. Yeah, just I have strong path of psychedelics since I was 18. Now I am 57. And my path was very much connected to knowledge about real traditional tribal use of substances, but also connected to very much to studying mystical tradition of the world. And now I am also very connected to the work to Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you know him, but he's also scientist. His experiences are very much now in research of universities, especially medical universities. And my point of view is that since my youth, I very much was with the background that actually reality is magical. Reality is co-creation with God or co-creation with the pure awareness or source of consciousness. So for me, it's very nice that you as a maybe more scientific community are also now discussing very close to this point of view. And yeah, I think we are co-creating maybe new paradigm of humanity, you know. So I'm happy to hear this discussion, and I am maybe a little bit more of the other side that for me, modern science is going to the direction to discover again this connection to this full magical state of consciousness. So thank you for the moment. This I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Yeah, if by magical you mean this creative aspect that Shulgin stressed, why not? Why not?
Yeah, like this Joe Dispenza. You know maybe about Joe Dispenza?
Well, you can tell us briefly in a word if you wish, please.
Yeah, Joe Dispenza, he's like without using psychedelics, he's leading like, for example, 2,000 people by week meditating together, where miracles are happening. Miracles like bones are growing, organs are growing, massive healings are happening, and this all proved by most advanced science now. Sorry, my English. Everything is in the time of these experiments, all this is by medical procedures, very on the highest quality.
All right.
In United
All right. So you mean it's
States.
measurable? Okay. Yeah. Objectively verifiable.
Yeah. And really, like miracles are happening, and he's believing that this is a new humanity emerging, you know, new state of consciousness of humanity where we are co-creating with this source of consciousness and where everything is possible. And on my path with psychedelics, I had a lot of mystical experiences, which for me is also like convincing me on this path that I am going back to this realization of full unity with this magical consciousness, which is source of life. You know?
Maybe your remark is somehow to the point. There is a late text by Shulgin from 2001. It's called as A Scientist's View of Miracle and Magic. And yeah, there he admits to it that his own quest, his own search is ultimately the quest for God. And now I'm quoting it literally. As I continue my own personal search for God, I am becoming increasingly convinced that He lies within me somewhere. Perhaps each person's God lies within him, and this is the meaning of the word entheogen. And if that God is the same God for all people, then we are all, in a sense, the same person, says Shulgin. Perhaps the role of a sacrament in any religious practice had been and is to let a moment's light to be shed on that part of reality. There is a remarkable congruity between changes of states of consciousness, religious experiences, mystical experiences, and personal miracles. This is what he says in the text, A Scientist's View of Miracles and Magic. So I think these terms are not out of context here. Yeah. So thank you. So do we have anything else to add? To summarize, would you like to add something? I will not introduce any more questions or problems here. Just to summarize.
So I might add that, going back to this idea that Sasha envisioned an effect of a novel molecule and possibly created that effect. Yeah. It's been mysterious to me why Gordon Ellis, when he was the first human taster of MDA, did not detect any emotional effects from MDA. He was essentially looking for decongestants and took a reasonable dose of MDA and did not have any emotional effects that he noted. And you could develop a theory that it was actually the counterculture who cared about love, who, by experimenting with MDA, created the entactogenic effect. Yeah, this is very, very interesting and a very radical statement, and I like it. And how about the person whom you've mentioned tried MDMA before Shulgin? You said that there was someone given MDMA by Shulgin. Do we know the effect of this experiment? Did it have empathogenic qualities to it or not? This is crucial in this context, I think. Yeah. What do you think? Yeah, both Karl Resnikov and his ex-girlfriend Judith are still alive and live in the Bay Area, so we could ask them. It would be very, very interesting. Yeah, but by that point, MDA already had a reputation. Yeah, but not MDMA, right? And it was clear, sort of like the analogy was like, if methamphetamine is to amphetamine, then MDMA is to MDA. And so you sort of expect them to be roughly similar. All right. So the question would be, did it have the effects that later on made it therapeutically useful, right? So no visions, no psychedelic effects, only the empathogenic qualities. Right. So yeah. Would they have it that way? Yep, that's the question. Yeah, well, if you could ask, why not? Please do so. Or yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. If we want to devise a method of experimentally verifying whether there is an imposition of certain qualities upon a substance by means of using it, that would be the way to verify it somehow retroactively, yes. Whether it had those qualities before Shulgin imposed it upon MDMA, if we assume that he did, or he and some other people who used it with him.
Well, I think looking back at the history of Merck,
but then it didn't have those qualities defined.
Well, but they certainly knew that it potentially could have drug effects. They certainly by 10 years later, 1923, were making large amounts of MDMA, and also started to make large amounts of amphetamine for the German war effort.
But so, they were not trying it out on human subjects, as far as I know. Or...
Well, not as far as they've admitted.
All right. Yeah, who knows?
Certainly, just accidental exposure would have clued somebody in that there was something going on with that substance that was not like other amphetamines.
I don't know. Like, it takes a lot of accidental exposure to get a dose of MDMA versus LSD, though, right?
Well, true, sure, no question. But if you're making hundreds and hundreds of kilos, which apparently was the case, then some accidental exposures would certainly have cropped up. Maybe they didn't have a well-developed OSHA system.
I mean, I think ultimately it would be worth thinking about what's the right experiment to test this kind of idea. Like if you came up with a molecule that is ambiguous in its effects, and you gave it to a group with an expectation versus another molecule with similar binding and pharmacology, and you give it to another group with a different expectation, do you produce long-lasting differences in the pharmacology or not?
Yeah, but the question is also whether only expectation is the thing that matters, or some primordial experience that is tied to it.
Yeah. Yep.
In my view, my view is that it is obvious that it's not only the substance, that is like relation to the substance, that is like the consciousness in the moment, for me, this is like everything is relating in this oneness of everything. And this is which is it's go beyond mind. It starts to go to something which is so primordial, like going beyond duality of the maybe subject and object, and this starts for me this dimension of this mysterious mystical state of consciousness, which can understand this mystery, which is beyond the rational mind, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I think even Shulgin says in the quotation that I've given here, that we are all in a sense the same person. If this is true, that there is one subject, and we need no other ontology to somehow explain this mysterious fact of intersubjective sharing of a compound's quality. Yes, that
for example,
discursive transmission of this quality that gives some expectations as a result.
This is very close to many spiritual traditions, like Kashmir Shivaism, for example, which I study, and many others, which by different language speak the same what you said, that maybe finally is only one substance, like
this
only
is Spinoza. This is classical Platonic metaphysics. So we also have Western paradigms, monistic paradigms, that suggest that there is ultimately one being that's somehow diversified and pluralized, but ultimately one and the same. So so the question is, how do you access this oneness? And if this is done by means of psychedelics, of self-examination, why not? Ultimately, this is what you discover. This is what Shulgin seems to have discovered, and perhaps this is the ontology behind his science. So yeah. Any more comments?
Yeah, I can make a joke even, I was with the group of people who were sitting near the fire and start to sing, I am the mushroom, we are the mushrooms, and
well, however you call this being that is one, yes, it's ultimately beyond name. So
well, this has been a lovely conversation. I'm afraid I have to leave now. I look forward to attending some more of these. So
thank you. I suggest that we continue on a monthly basis. If you would care to join us, we would all appreciate it.
Wonderful. I look forward to it.
Thanks.
So
if anyone else would like to add something, please do so, and then we shall finish, I think.
Nice to see you guys.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Carl. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And see you in a month, hopefully. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So I'll check in with you tomorrow, Andre.
Yep, let's do that.
On all matters. Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks a lot, buddy. Great job.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.